Hi everybody, welcome to our second conversation with Jeff Beals. We seem to be having a group event here.
Hi, how y'all doing?
And just as a reminder, we'll ask Jeff to make a very brief opening statement. Then we have several questions for him. And then we will turn to you, our esteemed audience, to ask questions. Reminder that we want no opinions, only questions. And we have a cowbell in Deborah's able hands to keep order. And Harry will bring the microphone to you. And another note at the end, please to fill out and leave your evaluations in the box outside. Or right here at the door. And we will turn now to our up-close and personal conversation with candidate Jeff Beals for NY-19. Jeff, up to you for a quick opening statement.
Okay. Thank you very much. Should I use this? People can, makes it easier for people to hear me? I'll use it. Okay. This is my son Joseph. Come on up here so I can introduce you. Go back to mom. You can go back. This is my son Abraham. You can meet him too. You can go back to mom. Okay. And we also have members of my campaign that you'll be able to speak to too. We have Isla Shorenstein from Socrates, lifelong resident here, who is the chief of staff of my campaign, and Connor Boehm, our field director, who we recently discovered his family may have owned the entirety of Columbia County before the revolution. So we displaced him, but he's back. I went to BART. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to an exchange, so I won't speak much. I'll simply say I'm Jeff Beals. I'm a teacher, a high school history teacher in Woodstock, where my wife Suhair, who's also here, is a kindergarten teacher. And my story here in the Hudson Valley goes back before I was born. My grandparents, all four of them were survivors of the Holocaust. And they came as refugees to the United States, and they worked in factories and sweatshops in New York City. And they got themselves a piece of paradise in the Hudson Valley and the Catskills over in Sullivan County that they used to come to throughout their lives. And it was a place where my dad and my mom spent a big part of their childhood. And we held on to it in our family, and we built our family farm here in the Hudson Valley in Putnam County that we've had since I'm a boy. And I was drawn to government service from a young age, and I grew up in the Clinton years. And what that meant, and I can see it in the eyes of my students who are now coming of age in the Trump years, is that I thought of America as doing really well. And so I thought the place to make a difference was overseas. And I became an intelligence officer with the CIA during the Clinton administration, and I worked on the Middle East, and then I became a US diplomat, and I was stationed in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, where I worked with my friend Chris Stevens, who was a close friend of mine and the ambassador we lost in Benghazi, and we worked for peace there. And a year into the Iraq War, I was called to come out to Iraq because I had experience as a negotiator and I speak Arabic, and I answered that call to help find a way out of that conflict for our country. And I was one of the longest serving diplomats in the Iraq War. I helped to mediate the drafting of their constitution, and I helped to forge ceasefire talks between the insurgents and our generals, and I was decorated by the Army and the State Department for that work. But I came home after it because I came to a conclusion that the place to fight for democracy is not overseas, it's here at home. And I've been working on my farm, teaching, raising my family ever since. And I've come to believe, and this is what we can elaborate on, and I'll close with, that we have a real danger to our democracy right now. We have a choice that we have to make in our country. You can either have concentrated wealth in the hands of the very few, or you can have a democracy, but you can't have both. And we face that choice now as a country. We face it as a district that I think the whole country is looking to right now to make a difference. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Our first question is somewhat related, and it is this. What is the defining moment when you decided to run for Congress? What happened? Where were you? How did it work? Anything you'd like to say beyond what you've just started out with? Defining moment.
The defining moment for me came after the election when I took my students on a class trip to the inauguration of the Women's March. And we all went there as a class, and I saw the effect this was having, not just on my own community, not just on myself, not just on my friends at the State Department, but I realized that the call had come again for my own community and my own students to step up. And I organized the first swing left rally for our district in Woodstock in Ulster County. And after that, there was a really strong reception to it. People started saying you should run in my community. They felt that I could potentially beat John Faso. And I started thinking, maybe we do need to do this. So that's why I'm here.
Terrific, Jeff. Thank you. Approximately 47% of eligible voters do not vote. Student turnout is very low. And we saw in the past election that people who voted for Obama actually helped elect President Trump. If elected, or on your way to running, what are your plans to reach these disaffected voters?
We have a crisis in our democracy because people are not voting and because people are not inspired by either political party. And we have to find a way to forge a new coalition that is wider than any coalition we've had before by standing up for policies that are a progressive agenda that put forward solutions that benefit more than 90% of the citizens in America and in our district. That's how I think we're going to get people out in numbers they haven't had before. But I'll make one personal point about that. Because I am a former Middle East diplomat, I have this tendency to see the Middle East all the time when I'm here at home. And one of the things I can't help seeing, and you can all heckle it or agree or disagree, but I see tribalism emerging in our society. I see us fighting people and then immediately judging, not one of us, not me. And on that basis, we dismiss them. And we are unable to see the incredible commonalities that we all have. In our district, most of the people here are earning an average of about $30,000 a year. People are struggling to get by, working multiple jobs. People are struggling with healthcare, with personal debt, with credit card debt. I know that that's true, not just because I know the stats, but because it applies to me and my friends and our community. People that I know are mostly on the Affordable Care Act. So what I believe is if we speak to those people, we speak to those concerns in that agenda, we're going to wind up rallying a much wider constituency for our policies than we ever had before, and we're going to get those people to vote.
As you travel around the district, what are you hearing from small business owners and farmers about what's important to them, and how are your solutions different from Faso's?
The defining problem of our time, there are so many different problems I am seeing as I travel around this vast district, and I got the map of it there for anybody that needed a reminder. It's particularly useful here in Ulster because we're the only blue county. You see a lot of different stories, you hear a lot of different experiences, but I see one culprit, and the culprit is corporate power. It has become so large that it has bought out our democracy, and it's bought out our ability to represent ourselves and run our democracy. How do I differ from John Faso? John Faso is a corporate employee of Wall Street hedge fund donors who purchased his candidacy, who consider him their employee, and who call for him to take votes that support their interests and not the interests of this community. And John Faso goes along with it each and every time because that's his job security. Those are the people funding his campaign, and those are the people that take care of him if things don't work out here in the next election. And they're not going to work out here in the next election.
How would you translate your democratic values to reach this wider audience in the more traditionally Republican areas of this vast district?
This goes back to the tribal point. Let me finish it, and I'll answer that question that way. So what do you do when people are judging you instantly and saying, you're not one of us, you're not me? I have found that the most important thing to getting through to people is having the right messenger and the right message. The right messenger is somebody that can help to confound some of those tribal judgments. Now, I know there's people here in the room that hear my national security background. It's not necessarily what they're looking for every day of the week. I worked for Bill Clinton's administration. I worked for George W. Bush's administration. I was a Foreign Service officer and intelligence officer serving under both sides. I have farmed in the Hudson Valley. Our family were members of the Farm Bureau. A lot of members of the Farm Bureau are also Republicans. When I walk into a room and I talk to people in the district, as somebody that works here that has that background, they don't quite know where to place me. And I don't think they should have a place to place me, because the place to place me is working person in the district. Then when I start talking to them and I ask them, you working more than one job? Are you laboring under medical debt? Do you have credit card debt with predatory rates? The answer often becomes yes. And at that moment, we lock in because we realize that there is a progressive agenda to answer those concerns, and that's the agenda that I'm running.
What are the 3 positions you have that will help you get elected? I know you have many positions, but what do you think are the top 3 that will appeal to the broadest voterhood?
Yeah. The number 1 position is to acknowledge that we have a healthcare crisis in the United States, that we have a healthcare crisis in our district, that even the Affordable Care Act did not go far enough to help people, that many people have health insurance and are still not getting by because they can't afford their premiums, can't afford their co-pays, or can't afford their prescription drugs. The number 1 position that I believe should be at the heart of any Democratic campaign that truly aspires to speak to the concerns and struggles of most people is universal health care, Medicare for all, House Resolution 676. I consider it the number 1 vote that I would want to take as your congressman. Beyond that, I would say raising Social Security benefits. Our seniors right now have not seen an increase in their Social Security benefits, and they are not getting by on the benefits that they have. That is wrong. There is a loophole in the law that is allowing people that are earning tremendous amounts of money to not pay into Social Security at the rate the rest of us are. That's wrong. We are all paying into that system, and we should all be taking out of it. And it should be something that provides dignity to our seniors in their retirement years. The last question the last one I would name, and this is maybe not one you're all expecting, but I'll go to foreign policy. I'm a former US diplomat, and I have been surprised to see not only the way our country is heading, but the reaction of citizens has made me think that while foreign policy is not usually at the heart of a congressional campaign, this time it should be, because we need to put diplomacy over a rising militarism in our foreign policy at home and abroad. We need to fund the State Department. We need to enter into the Paris Climate Agreement. We need to support agreements overseas that help the cause of peace, like the agreement that we pursued to disarm Iran's nuclear capability and not walk away from it so as to increase the chances of nuclear war, not belittle and taunt foreign leaders. I think if we put ourselves forward as a diplomatic force in this world for our values, it's going to be a really strong platform too.
Thank you. And in a related question, if elected, what is the first bill you would sponsor?
Me personally? You mean, I want to be a signatory or a co-sponsor to House Resolution 676. So that's my first.
And could you illuminate that for us if we're...
You want me to get more? Yeah, sure.
No, just what is it?
Yeah. The bill is Medicare for All. It was put forward by Representative Conyers. The bill calls for our country to move away from the privatized, profiteering health insurance system that we currently have that consumes about 18% of our GDP, that produces enormous returns for insurance executives while producing poor care and subpar results for the citizens, and instituting a system that will save us money, save us lives, and help put our country on the footing that so many other industrialized countries in the world have, where all citizens are provided and get health care.
So after that passes with your signature, what would be the next bill that you yourself would sponsor?
After that one. I would want to put forward legislation for family leave, for sick leave, to help working people be able to get by in their jobs and in their personal lives. Right now, we say we're a country that cares about family values. We say we're a country that cares about raising your children, cares about the next generation. But the simple fact is that most working people are working under conditions and under circumstances that are not conducive to raising a family or having a normal home life. We need to change that.
And what, Jeff, in your career, have you done to advance women in the workplace? You mentioned family leave. But can you give us some examples of how you have supported women's rights?
This is maybe not what you're all expecting, but it's quite amazing. You know, Iraq is superior to the United States in one remarkable respect. Do you all know that the Iraqi parliament is composed of over a quarter women? I was involved in helping set up a government in Iraq. I was involved in trying to find a way to stabilize that country and get us out of Iraq by establishing a government that didn't exist there after the war shattered all the institutions. And one of the things that I did was mediate the drafting of Iraq's constitution and help set up a government and a parliament that included greater representation for women than they had ever had there before in their history.
It's good. And as a follow-up, what will you do to guarantee a woman's right to reproductive care?
This healthcare question is and carries within it the question of women's reproductive health. We have to fully fund Planned Parenthood. We do not, and the number one thing I'm going to do for women's reproductive health is defeat John Faso, who is out there casting votes to defund Planned Parenthood while pretending that he's a supporter of women's right to choose. So we have to unmask this man, and then we have to defeat this man and stop him from taking these votes that are hurting women in our district. Is that okay?
Sorry, we were just
They're like, nah, I don't buy that.
We were just having a moderator moment here.
Sure.
I have a bonus question because you've been very thorough here. What is the question we haven't asked that you would like to answer?
Well, you haven't asked maybe a personal question. You know, running for office, you travel around this district, we have so many citizens, so many stories, but in the end, you're driven by your personal stories too. We lost one of my students last year to cancer. And as a school, we had a memorial service for this student of mine. We knew this was going to happen. She had terminal cancer. She was one of the most extraordinary 10th graders that I had in my history class. And we knew that was coming. But what I didn't know was coming was that on a day when we had the memorial service for my student, the family was taking up a collection for us to cover medical costs that still existed even after her passing. And so I think about her a lot, and I think about what her family has been through, and I think about how wrong it is that we have a system that adds to the grief that everybody is already suffering.
And I do have a personal question,
Sure.
Since you opened that door.
Yeah.
After your extensive and highly demanding career, what made you decide to leave that behind and become a teacher here?
Like a lot of people, I wanted to raise my family at home. You know, I worked in war zones in the Middle East, and I wanted to be back with my family in a place where I thought my sons could grow up, and the Hudson Valley was the place of my dreams from a young age. I knew it and loved it, and I thought that's the place that we could have a wonderful family life. But I also thought that there is a difference that can be made, and this is the evolution you go through in life. Like I told y'all, you know, I was the child of the Clinton years. Bill Clinton talked about building a bridge to the new millennium. I mean, if you go read the inaugural address, it's pretty heady stuff, and it doesn't even read very well anymore. And I believed that as a teacher, I started thinking about my own life, and I realized that a lot of those people had made as big a difference as anything I had seen being made overseas, and I wanted to be part of that too.
Terrific. We're going to turn now to questions from our audience. Just a reminder, no opinions, only questions. And Harry will bring the microphone to you. We're going to start on the left, appropriately, and move to the right. So we'll go section by section, taking 2 or 3 questions in each section, and then if there's time left over, we'll go back. So first question, right here in the front. Your name, please, and the town that you are voting in.
Edgar Rodriguez, Newport's here. Just a quick. A question as a diplomat about Puerto Rico. Would you support the independence of Puerto Rico or statehood? Would you support a $1 trillion package to reconstruct the island of Puerto Rico? the history, if you're not aware of it, Puerto Rico has been a colony since 1898. The Jones Act of 1917 by fiat imposed citizenship on Puerto Ricans. Given that background, how would you vote on the status of Puerto Rico, and would you support a $1 trillion budget to reconstruct the island of Puerto Rico?
Number one thing, when I'm coming forward as a congressman, I want to represent you all. So I don't want to be the person who comes in and imposes. I'm a vessel to represent people in Washington. So it sounds to me like you do support that. And if you do, I want you in the office right away to tell me everything about it. And I'd also want to know what the Puerto Rican people support. Is there an overwhelming support for independence and statehood at this moment?
I can answer the question.
You can answer it, Ken.
As a diplomat, you should know that when a country is occupied,
No, I know the history, but I don't know if there's been a current.
referendums have gone.
Yeah, where's the latest referendum? Haven't they gone both ways? Yeah.
It goes both ways.
Right.
It flip-flops, it's imposed.
Right. That's just the background that I know from
With
it.
all those complications. But if you're a congressman, you support the independence of Puerto Rico.
I would support much more funding for the reconstruction of Puerto Rico than has been going on right now. I think it's been neglected. I think it's been politicized. Number one, that. And as for whether or not we move towards statehood or citizenship, I'd want to study it further and know about what the Puerto Rican people want versus what we want.
Next question.
We'll talk.
Yellow. A yellow jacket.
Right, this is so none of those hunters, they say, oh, I didn't see her. Kitty Brown, New Paltz. How much of the damage that has been done to our environmental policy and the reduction of our national parks and monuments can be undone in the next session?
The big question all of us are asking is how much of the damage that is being done right now on every front can be undone. And all I can tell you is that I will make it my mission to undo all of it if we can. And when it comes to the environment, more than any other issue, I think this country is looking at us here to be the voice and the stewards of our natural resources and our environment, because we are the people of one of the great natural expanses in America. So number one, that's why I say we have to talk about climate change. We have to take anybody who questions it and explain to them that this is a national security threat. It is the number one national security threat. It is a domestic security threat to your homes, which are going to be washed off their hillsides if you don't watch it. And we already had damage in past hurricanes that have shown us this has happened. And so we have to take action with investment in solar and wind aggressively. And yes, we should not be opening up further areas to drilling, closing the boundaries of our national monuments and state parks when we know this is going to do enormous damage and only lead us deeper down a hole of fossil fuel dependency that has already shown itself to be a dead end, nationally, internationally, and in my own career, I have had to witness these companies take the role they took in pushing for war overseas, in being involved in the Iraq War. And I can tell you another piece of my biography that doesn't often come up is when I left being a diplomat, I was offered a job by guess who? Can you guess? Middle East, yeah, there you go. ExxonMobil said, hey, you've got some real skills, we like it. This is good. You speak Arabic and you know everybody in Iraq. Will you negotiate our oil deals? I said, no, I will not do that. And I came home to my family farm and started working here in the Hudson Valley.
Thank you. One more question over here.
Perkins Berber Gardner. Jeff, what strategy would you be using to address the fact that Zephyr Teachout, a highly qualified and popular candidate who lost this district against Vaso by a margin over 29,000, and as has been pointed out by some other people here, there's a very low turnout by students, and I might also add by the ethnic minorities. What would you do to mobilize them as a way of helping to correct the voter turnout that helped Vaso to win?
That's the million-dollar question that we're all asking, and I'm sure your answer to it is going to determine maybe which candidate you're going to support and what you think we need to do. Why did Zephyr lose? And the first thing I would say to it when we draw our lessons is to remember that Zephyr is not the only person who has lost New York 19. Sean Eldridge lost New York 19. He's a wealthy guy who moved here and did not succeed. And then before that, Julian Schreibman lost in New York 19. Thankfully, he's now a state Supreme Court judge as a result of the last election. But he was a local born and raised guy who lost this seat on a year when Obama won our district. So there is no magic bullet for winning this thing. And that's why I come back to first principles. If you want to represent the people of New York 19 and you want them to vote for you as their representative, then you should, number one, be representative. And that means, I think, being a working person in the district, trying to raise a family here yourself, which is the thing that a lot of people are doing here. And number two, voice support for policies that truly are representative. And that's what I mean by a progressive agenda that we know can empower and mobilize more than 90% of the people in this district who are being shut out and left behind by an economy that is rigged in favor of giant corporations and giant interests in New York City, Wall Street, and the financial sector. I think if we put forward that kind of a policy, it's going to motivate people. And it's not just theory, because it already has. Our campaign has formed student groups at universities all around the district, so young people are mobilized now in greater numbers than they ever had before. Grassroots groups around the district have been helping set up events for me in Oneonta, in Walton, in Gilbertsville, all over our district. And I'm working with young Democrats groups in our district too. And I'm also supporting a policy that I think will get seniors out to vote, because I think seniors right now are not getting by on Social Security benefits, and they're being price gouged on their prescription drugs. And that is something that is hitting you no matter which side of the aisle you're on. And it is causing many people I know, and I've spoken to doctors in our district, who tell me that they know they have patients who are rationing out their own medicine, taking half doses. This is an outrageous situation to have going on. This is enormous suffering and pain and death in our district. And if we are not going to speak to it loudly, we're not going to win, and we wouldn't deserve to. But if we do speak to it loudly and face down the vested interests that want to stop us from speaking to it loudly, and I mean not just, of course, the Republican Party, but the insurance industry and these vast forces that are behind the donors of many campaigns, then we're not going to get those votes. But if we do, we will. So that's my answer.
Let's move to this section.
Never hear what do you want?
Can I get one more? Can I get one?
No.
He's a leader. He can have a private audience anytime he wants. And as can any of you.
I think we need to let Jason ask his question. He's related.
Thank you, Harry. All right, thank you. Okay, Jeff, as you know, I'm a teacher as well. And we've had 4 lockdown drills since the beginning of the school year for active shooter drills in our school. That's where we take the kids into a room, we close up the doors, lock everything, we put them in a dark room, turn off the lights, and then the sheriffs pretend that someone's shooting in the building. They shake the doors, they scream. And this is where we're at right now because of guns in the United States. We just finished installing a camera aimed at every classroom door. That was Friday. So, you know, and it's, I don't want to give the bell. We have over 115,000 people shot a year, 34,000 people die a year due to gun violence, and 2,600 children a year. So my point is this, I'm sorry, Heather.
Ring the bell.
Can this be addressed
Wife's
when
never
you're
gonna
running
ring the bell.
against, if you're running against FASO, can you address gun-related issues? How far can a candidate go? What are you willing to try to accomplish? You know, my big concern is AR-15, but can we even address this in this divided climate?
Yes, we can, and yes, we should, and we're going to be speaking for the majority of the people in our district and in this country when we support sensible laws on background checks for gun owners, when we support closing loopholes that are allowing weapons to get out there to people who shouldn't have them. When we support those policies, we're going to be standing against who? Not against the majority of gun owners and non-gun owners. The majority of gun owners and non-gun owners, and I am a gun owner, and we have one in our family farm. We've used it, and it's a tool on a farm. We know that these people, this population does support those steps. So we have to stand for it. And I don't think and the people that oppose it are frankly the gun industry that wants to sell more guns. That's the origin of the opposition to sensible approaches to the gun problem. Now, I speak to this from a place that I think allows, just like you, means that we have credibility and we can speak to it. Number one, I've led those drills too at my school. And there is nothing that hits home harder for you than, in our case, we cram a whole class of students into a bathroom, and close the door and say everybody here has to stay silent until we get the all clear. It's a frightening and disturbing thing. And the thing that came to mind, and my dad's here tonight, are the stories of when they were getting under their desks for nuclear drills, which is a trauma that you never lose. I mean, once people in authority, like your teacher, are making you do these horrible things, you're going to remember it your whole life. And so I feel really sick inside when we're doing that. That's number one. But number two, I just want to say from my experience that I've been out there on a farm with a gun, understand the use of a gun when you have to stop predators that are taking on your livestock, because we've had it happen. I also know hunters, they hunt on our farm, good friends of mine, the whole place is riddled with tree stands. There's no reason that we can't form common bonds with these guys, because they're my friends and we already have those bonds. But the last thing I'll say is, I have friends on the other side too. I have a friend of mine, who shall remain nameless, who actually monitors our country's no-fly list. He's in charge of it. And he tells me, when we talk, he says, how is it possible that I am keeping names on a no-fly list for the United States of America, and there's no such thing as a no-gun list for these same people? It makes no sense. This is a national security threat to this country. And anybody that stands in the way of it is not only standing just for an industry and for sales over human lives, but they're also standing against our national security as a country. And I think we are going to have a really strong position if we stand up for that. It's not going to be a problem.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good question. All right.
Great question.
We're
We're in the center section.
But people can heckle too, because I got to get used to the FASO environment. It's not going to be all Democrats when they're general.
Hi, I'm Rachel Kunsinger from Douglas County. If you were in Congress now and the budget was up for a vote, is there an issue which you would choose to close the government down if it were not being supported?
No, that is what is so tragic about our politics right now. We have lost an understanding of what even Congress is. It is not a sinecure for employees of the Mercers or the Koch brothers. It is not a place to pursue radical ideological agendas and burn the house down. It is the only place where we're supposed to have a civil democracy where we can get legislation passed. And you don't hold the country hostage in order to pass legislation that is supposed to support and help the country. So I don't see that as being a legislative tactic. And I say this as somebody that has bent many arms behind many backs in negotiations. I mean, I mediated the drafting of agreements overseas, like the Iraqi Constitution, that were not pleasant encounters. But there were limits that you knew, because they hit at your own credibility as a negotiator. If you really are arguing from the national interest, but you're willing to sacrifice the national interest in order to achieve your goal, well, then I guess you didn't really argue from a position of the national interest to begin with, because you were ready to blow up the government or shut down services to too many Americans in order to achieve your ends. Extremism.
More questions in this section.
We'll come back.
Okay, so I'm Susan Denton from New Paltz. My question is somewhat similar to the one about the active shooter drills. 54% of mass killings are committed by people who have a history of domestic violence. What? I see it as a continuum from bullying all the way up to murder and mass murder. And what can we do to make this a more civil society and a less violent society, in your opinion?
We have an epidemic of domestic violence, and it's happening in our district. And a close friend of mine is an assistant DA here in Ulster County and works on the issue and has told me many harrowing tales that are not making headlines. So what can we do? We can create norms and stand up for civility in our society. And I think that's going on right now with a movement to stand against the harassment, sexual harassment of women in our society. And we can do it by acknowledging that this isn't a women's issue, this is actually a men's issue. And we have to create these norms and then talk about them openly and make sure that we stand up for them and enforce them. And gradually you can change the culture. But you also have to prosecute and see to it that you actually follow through on the charges of people that commit crimes. So those are the two things that I think we have to do, and some of them are happening, thankfully.
Karen.
I'm Jane Jamberg from New Paltz. You said that you're for the bill that's in Congress for Medicare for All.
Yes.
And as a Medicare recipient myself, as someone who has it, I'm interested in knowing how you would address in that bill and what you would personally do to address the issue of the non-negotiability of drug prices with pharma under the current Medicare system, and also the lack of services for women's services, women's health services under the current Medicare. How is that addressed in the bill you support? And how is that bill that you would support any better than someone on the Affordable Care Act with a plan that might have women's health services if it was a younger woman?
The last part, can you explain it? How is the last part?
Medicare,
Yeah.
as it's currently put together,
Yeah.
does not have women's health services, basically.
Mm-hmm.
You're entitled only to an exam, woman's exam, every other year, and they call it a sort of like a health lady exam. It's got a very funny name. So I'm wondering how the current bill that you support is different than that, and what the advantage would be over other plans that people might have.
The effect, when I say Medicare for All, it's a simplification for House Resolution 676, which in a way expands Medicare, turns it into something that actually you could also compare to Medicaid. And so it expands that coverage, and that's why I support it. And why I support it so strongly is because I believe this is not just a humane step, it is a sensible step for us economically, will help women, and will save us enormous money and lives. And when you speak to women's care, that preventative care that we provide through Planned Parenthood, the more of it that we provide, the better off we're going to be, the more money we're going to save. This is why you shouldn't be applying these big economic concepts to a field that is not a profit-making field, and that's why we've gone so wrong, because everybody is in the mindset that with healthcare, where literally the incentive is to figure out, well, how little coverage can I give you and still get away with this? That's what they're figuring out at McDonald's. You know, how many fries can I give you in the small fries and still have you walk away and say, I got my fries? But the problem with that mentality when you apply it to health insurance and healthcare is that you wind up with people getting sicker, because if they got the preventative care that they were getting through Planned Parenthood, they would have gotten the mammogram, and they would have not gotten breast cancer and not gone down an enormously costly and tragic road with their lives. So I support that legislation because I believe it expands care for women, it expands care for everybody, and it saves us a bundle and turns us into the humane society we were supposed to be, and what the Democratic Party was supposed to talk about.
Great. Let's move over to this section.
Okay, oh, back here we go.
Lots of hands, good.
I'll start in the back.
Remember, no opinions, just
No
questions.
opinion.
Okay. Tom Denton, New Paltz. You got a question about what was the process of going from being a diplomat to teaching?
Yeah.
Your website gives some information about little nuggets. You studied history at Columbia, if that's accurate. I don't know if it is.
Yeah.
You've been involved in filmmaking also.
Yeah.
Can you give a full picture of what your bio, your life, what have you been doing since leaving, I guess, '07 or '06, the diplomatic corps,
Yeah.
to the time you began teaching in Woodstock, which was what, 2015 or something like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Happy to. First of all, my website, bealsforcongress.com, has a section, Meet Jeff, and that tells your biography in a couple paragraphs. They've told me that people won't read more than a couple paragraphs, so then it goes at the bottom of it that says, would you like more on Jeff? And then you click on that, and then it gives you this full page dump, because my life's kind of interesting, and there have been a lot of things, but if you start listing them all, people's eyes kind of bug out of their heads and they lose, who are you again? The simple account of my life is I was a CIA intelligence officer, I was a US diplomat, I returned from the Middle East to my family farm. I had briefly studied at Columbia when I was considering doing a PhD in history. I decided actually, no, I'd rather teach history at the high school level. I raised turkeys on our family farm, and I shot a feature film with my brother that talks about corporate America and childhood and the candy industry, which I'll do a screening of at some point. It's right now at the festival circuit. After that, I began substitute teaching, and then I became a full-time teacher in Woodstock.
Next question.
I'm Bob Gelbach from Saugerties. As an educator, I'd be interested in your assessment of the educational challenges facing the whole of the district that you'd be representing, and what you think public policy can do to address those concerns.
This election and our government and my campaign are about safeguarding our democracy, strengthening our democracy, and it comes from a belief that education is the infrastructure of our democracy, and that the education we give to our young people ensures the future of our democracy. And when we don't invest in it and provide for it, we mortgage our own future and we betray the fundamental promise of America, which is that we're a country of opportunity for all, if you'll work for it, which means opportunity for every young person. This means a lot to me because I am experiencing something I never would have imagined seeing. My students, and I don't know, there's not a lot of really young people here. My students are bleak about their own future, which is shocking to me because 18-year-olds, as I was, are extremely invincible and think everything's going to be great. They don't. They're very concerned, not just about the job market, they're concerned about their own debt that they're going to accrue. Because so many of our young people now are graduating from school with essentially a mortgage, but no house. That's what student loan debt has become. And they're inheriting this debt, and they actually can't declare bankruptcy or get rid of it, even while corporations can get out of their debt and declare bankruptcy for their own problems. So my belief is that we need to support free public education in our universities, we need debt relief for our students, and we need to invest strongly in our school system. Right now, about a quarter of schools in the United States are considered decrepit and in need of structural repair. That's outrageous and so depressing for a country like ours. So I think we need to be investing in infrastructure and investing in education in that way too.
I found a young person.
This is not just any young person. This is one of the major guys. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Evan Holland-Scheffler. I'm a student at New Paltz High School. I really should be doing my AP American History work right now.
I'll help you after.
In my AP American History class right now, we are studying the Civil War. In a prelude to the Civil War, the divisiveness in politics since the debate over slavery and states' rights got to such a divisive point that southern states decided to secede from the Union. The divisiveness in our politics has never been this high, as I bet everyone can agree. It's pretty bad right now. How can you do anything to make our politics more civil and less of a divisive culture?
That's a beautiful question, and you pinpointed the problem at the core of our country, and I think you're going to do well if you draw that comparison in your AP US History essays. I say this as a guy grading those kind of essays. You're going to do well. Just give 2 examples in each paragraph. thesis statement. And my thesis statement would be that the divisions in our country are illusory, they are being foisted upon us, and there is far more that unites us than divides us if we're willing to stand up for the causes that benefit all of us. Believe it. We're not only going to get through this, we're going to be more united than we've ever been before, because the answer to it all lies within the platform we put forward. My campaign, it's no accident, is called Unite New York 19. And I'm calling it Unite New York 19 because there is a crazy thing that happens when you start staring too long, as I have been, at this map of our district. It starts to morph in your mind, kind of the way things do when you're staying up really late doing your homework. And you start to realize that it's a microcosm of America. That our district is the district, and it is the place where this division has happened, and where these swings that have hurt our country have taken place. Our district voted for Barack Obama twice, and then just voted for Donald Trump. This district has within it all the varieties of the American experience, from places like New Paltz to farmers in Schoharie and Rensselaer County. It has rural, urban, it has all the divisions that we have in America. And what it has that is even more amazing is a civic spirit and a civic engagement that, if really harnessed and spoken to with a real platform, I think can cause all those people to come together. Because the last thing that it has that's most amazing to me of all is a place called Hyde Park, where another guy that grew up in the Hudson Valley lived, who you're probably also going to write an essay on, FDR. And all the things that I'm advocating that people will attack you on and say, oh, you're a crazy left-winger, you're crazy progressive, you're not. It's all right there in the speeches and arguments and proposals that FDR made, a man who aspired to universal health care for this country, a cause that was taken up by Harry Truman and John F. Kennedy, and who also created Social Security. But we've gone from the age of fireside chats to 3 a.m. tweets. So things have gotten weird. But we can get it back, and we can unite this country, believe it. And you can be a part of it, because you already are. I know you've done work on other elections, and you're somebody that is the answer. All of you are the answer. You're doing it. We've never done this before. This is going to be the way we beat John Faso, and I think the whole country is counting on us to do what we're doing right now.
Bravo.
One more question before we'll ask Jeff to summarize.
Quick hand raising.
Andrea Russo, New Paltz. My question is, if we do take back the Democrats do take back the House in the next election, someone will introduce articles of impeachment. And I want to know if you think, in terms of either saving the human race or even just furthering democratic ideals. What's your thought on that? Do you think that's the way to go? Would you support it? Have you thought about it?
I believe in the rule of law, and I believe in our Constitution, and I believe that believing in those things means standing up for the notion that no one is above them. Nobody, not the President of the United States, and not anybody in this room, not me, not any congressperson. So if I were your representative in Congress, I'd be standing for that, and I wouldn't be asking myself, who is it that we're considering violated these things? I'd be asking, was the Constitution violated? Were our laws violated? And if so, what are the steps we take? In the case of an ordinary citizen, it's called indictment. In the case of a president, it's called impeachment. And right now, there's an investigation going on, and it needs to be pursued to its fullest course, because we do need to see what to do, and we should never flinch at wherever the facts take us.
Jeff, we'd love to have you just wrap up in 1 minute, if you'd like to, whatever message you'd like to leave with us here today.
What I would leave you all with is a note of responsibility and confidence. We are blessed and cursed here in New York 19. We are cursed because we do not have a congressional representative. This is where there are echoes of people that don't have citizenship or in other countries We don't have a person representing us in Congress right now. We have somebody who is representing other interests that he was bankrolled for. That's a curse. But we have a blessing. The blessing is that we are among the few people in the great United States of America that can actually do something about it. This is one of the only swing districts in the United States. The eyes of the country are on us right now to get this right and to get this done. And I can tell you that if we figure out how to do it here, we're going to have not just saved New York 19, we're going to have taken a major step that I think will be mirrored elsewhere to save America. And I think we're also going to set a blueprint for how this can be done correctly in 2020. But when you ask yourself, how are you going to do it? My message to you all is feel that responsibility and then stick to your guns. Stand up for what you actually believe in. Demand it from your candidate, because that's how you win an election. Don't get too clever by half in this room. Don't start thinking, how do I figure out some cockamamie scheme to entice somebody else with this little benefit or this little bonus? The great answers to the great problems of our time are right here within our hearts, within the platform of the Democratic Party historically, and within the great legacy that is here in New York 19. I believe very strongly that if we stand up for that with a progressive agenda, that we are going to do the opposite of the other side. They will present big, bold, wrong solutions to the problems of our time, like build a wall, ban the Muslims, and we will present big, bold, actual solutions to the problem of our time, like universal health care, facing down and combating climate change, and rejecting war and militarism to put diplomacy at the forefront of our international affairs and lead the world again. I think it's heady stuff, but it all starts in rooms like this, with citizens like yourselves who are way more important than the candidates, and I hope you'll get behind my candidacy and we can all do this together, because I think we can make a difference not just for New York 19, but for the whole United States of America. So thank you for your time.
We'd now like to remind you, please, to fill out your evaluations. If you need a form or a pencil, please raise your hand and Liz will provide. And we thank you heartily for coming out tonight.